In the nascent days of summer, 1931, while the ensemble of Frankenstein endured the stifling embrace of studio illumination, a gaunt, towering Englishman found himself confined to a horizontal surface. Intricate lighting apparatuses pulsed with an unsettling energy near his person as a special effects team artfully manipulated incandescent carbon rods suspended above him, causing beads of perspiration to trickle down his artfully constructed brow. For a relentless span of 30 hours, he was destined to undergo this same ordeal. Layers of padded fabric saturated with sweat, heavy 11-pound boots, and a contraption rigidly forcing his shoulders into a stoop, all in the service of bringing an as-yet unnamed entity into being. When Universal Pictures finally unveiled the completed motion picture that December, his name was conspicuously absent from the grand theatrical announcement. He existed solely as a living enigma, a mere question mark rendered tangible. Yet, this anonymous portrayal would serve as the crucible for William Henry Pratt, transforming him into the iconic Boris Karloff and securing his place within the hallowed halls of horror luminaries. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Boris Karloff, originally William Henry Pratt, entered the world on the 23rd of November, 1887 at Hernville, situated on Forest Hill Road in East Dulwich, the youngest of 9 siblings. His father, Edward John Pratt, an Anglo-Indian administrator within the Indian Salt Revenue Service, was unfortunately notorious for bouts of drunken violence. Family accounts relate instances where he allegedly hurled his wife, Eliza Miller, down a flight of stairs and dragged one of his daughters about the residence by her hair. These appear to have been more than isolated incidents. Eliza departed from him in 1889, and some records even suggest a divorce, a remarkably bold step for that period, leading her to relocate with her children through various London suburbs before finally settling in Enfield by 1902. William's father was a phantom in his life, vanishing when the boy was merely 2 years old. Edward Pratt passed away in Paris in 1897. The youngest son inherited a complex lineage. Both his parents were born in colonial Bombay, and both possessed at least partial Indian heritage. His father likely had an Indian grandparent, while his mother was unequivocally of mixed ancestry, descended from Anglo-Indian and Siamese lines. Among these ancestors were notable figures, particularly his great-aunt Anna Leonowens, whose life served as the inspiration for The King and I. Anna herself had concealed her Asian background, presenting herself as a widowed Welsh woman. This inherited inclination to obscure ancestral roots would echo throughout the Pratt family. This blended heritage endowed the young William with a darker complexion, something he could not conceal in a society preoccupied with matters of race. As he matured, he faced derision for both his dark features and his speech impediments. He had bow legs, a significant stutter, and a lisp. Both educators and his peers ridiculed his crooked legs, with medical professionals even suggesting surgical intervention. These hardships forged within him a steadfast resilience and a profound empathy for the marginalized, qualities that would later imbue his monstrous characters with profound pathos. Years later, his daughter Sarah recounted a simple anecdote that illuminated her father's character. "We had some dear friends who raised rabbits, and I desperately wanted one," she reminisced. When her father invited her to select one, she chose a perfectly formed rabbit, leaving behind another with a bent ear. On the journey home, her father inquired why she hadn't picked the floppy-eared bunny, remarking that he would have selected that one. She explained, because that's the one that needed the most love. As this new chapter unfolded and William progressed through his education, expectations began to mount. His 5 elder brothers anticipated his entry into the consular service and arranged for him to attend Uppingham School, followed by King's College in London. However, at the age of 9, a moment of profound realization occurred. Cast as the demonic king in a Christmas pantomime of Cinderella, he reveled in the audience's excited murmurs as he dramatically unfurled his cloak, resolving at that instant to become an actor. In 1906, the family suffered another significant loss with the passing of Eliza. The family was of a middle-class standing and an inheritance was due. Despite being only 18, William would not gain access to his share for another 3 years, upon reaching his majority at 21. By 1908, he was dutifully preparing for the diplomatic examinations, but he harbored a secret plan. He deliberately failed the tests, desperate to pursue acting and hoping this apparent setback would persuade his family to allow him to follow his aspirations. This decision, however, was met with disapproval within a family of civil servants tasked with administering an empire. His brothers prohibited him from performing, even in a church pantomime, and withheld financial support, preventing him from even renting rehearsal space. When his family's legal representative suggested he be dispatched overseas to Canada or Australia, his brothers readily embraced the idea. Thus, William resorted to a coin toss, with the unfortunate outcome falling to the Canadians. He later humorously recalled this event. In 1909, he used his inheritance to secure passage and steerage to Canada, hoping that on a different continent, his family's influence over him would diminish. With little concrete direction, he found himself in a pasture at dawn, a halter in hand, expected to round up horses, a task entirely foreign to him. Manual labor became his lot for the ensuing decade. He toiled, digging drainage ditches for the BC Electric Company, earning $2.80 for a 10-hour day, clearing land, felling trees, and hauling sacks of cement, work that inflicted permanent damage to his back. Between engagements, he avidly consumed theater reviews and sought any opportunity to perform. In Vancouver, he joined the Jean Russell Players and subsequently the Harry St. Clair Repertory Company. His initial involvement involved painting scenery and transporting equipment. Eventually, he secured minor roles, progressing to lead parts, earning £6 per week. While on tour in Kamloops, the company requested he adopt a stage name for the program. He spontaneously devised a Slavic-sounding first name that evoked an exotic aura, Boris. This new moniker, he later quipped, was conjured from the thin Canadian air. He adopted the surname Karloff, fabricating the story that it was his mother's maiden name. This also served as a form of camouflage. At that time in the United States, individuals of South Asian descent faced discriminatory immigration laws and a level of racial animosity that far surpassed the already intense prejudices prevalent in Britain and Canada. If his ambition was to achieve success in the U.S. one day, then a Russian-sounding surname would act as a protective veil for his Anglo-Indian heritage. just exotic enough to offer a plausible explanation for his appearance while still maintaining a European veneer. He began fabricating narratives for interviewers, claiming his mother was Russian and his father English. Even his official documents reflected this alteration. Upon his marriage to his first wife, Grace Harding, in 1910, he signed the marriage certificate as Boris Karloff. A significant transformation was underway. That union dissolved within 3 years, a pattern that repeated as he married and divorced Olive Dell Wilton, Montana Lena Williams, and Helen Vivian Soule. Throughout the 1910s and 20s, the constant touring and precarious financial state of a repertory actor left little room for domestic stability, it appears. Curiously, however, he would never again allude to any of these 4 wives for the remainder of his life, nor would he inform his later family of his previous marriages. The existence of a provincial actor in Canada during the 1910s was arduous and uncertain. Troupes performed weekly repertory. Actors were required to memorize new plays while simultaneously performing current ones, construct sets, sew costumes, and even solicit contributions to cover travel expenses. When a tornado devastated the theater in Regina, the company was compelled to disband, and Karloff took employment with a hauling firm. If a force of nature had disrupted his theatrical endeavors, then sheer serendipity was poised to set him on an entirely new trajectory. A theatrical journal was discarded from a passing train window at a station, and Karloff retrieved it. Within its pages, his gaze fell upon an advertisement seeking an actor for the Prince Albert Players in Saskatchewan. Karloff applied and was hired, soon embarking on tours across the Canadian prairies with this considerably more distinguished company. He discovered his forte performing melodramas and farces for audiences of farmers and railroad workers, gradually overcoming his stutter through careful breath control, though his lisp persisted. He attempted to bring the repertory company to Chicago in 1914, but encountered little interest. He also tried to enlist in the British Army when the First World War commenced, but a physician detected a heart murmur and deemed him unfit. "My funds were rapidly depleting," he later recalled. "I decided to return to where I was valued, meaning the stage." He resumed his travels across Canada and now also through the American Midwest. These years were pivotal. He acquired skills in set construction, financial management, and vocal control. By the time he relocated to Los Angeles in 1919, he had already participated in dozens of theatrical productions and cultivated the discipline that would later sustain him during lengthy periods in the makeup chair. Hollywood in the 1920s was a burgeoning hub for film extras, but Karloff's darker features restricted him to stereotypical roles. He portrayed Native Americans in westerns and villains of ambiguous ethnicity in silent films. The remuneration was meager, frequently $5 per day, and he supplemented his income by working as a truck driver and cement hauler. While trudging home through a downpour after a demanding day as an extra, he experienced another fortunate encounter. An expensive automobile stopped, offering him a ride. Inside was Lon Chaney Sr., the master of the grotesque. Chaney imparted a piece of counsel: cultivate something distinctive. Karloff heeded this advice and began experimenting with makeup, discovering methods to enhance rather than diminish his unique appearance. With the advent of sound, He feared his lisp and resonant voice would spell the end of his career, only to find that the new technology actually favored distinctive vocal qualities. Directors began casting him in minor roles in gangster films and melodramas. The gravitas in his delivery proved to be a significant asset. His inaugural substantial breakthrough arrived in 1930. The Belasco Theater in Los Angeles presented The Criminal Code, a drama concerning a wrongfully convicted man. Karloff portrayed a hardened inmate with a menacing presence, and his performance captured the attention of the esteemed director Howard Hawks. Hawks subsequently cast him in the cinematic adaptation of the play, marking his first significant screen role. This was sufficient to draw the notice of another influential director, one who would profoundly alter the course of his life. James Whale was in the process of adapting Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and his initial preference for the monster Bela Lugosi declined the part, unwilling to obscure his recognizable features beneath layers of makeup. In the commissary at Universal, Hawks noticed Karloff's weathered countenance, heavy-lidded eyes, and prominent cheekbones, and invited him for a screen test. "A monster," Karloff later recounted. "I needed to earn a living, and I accepted." Makeup artist Jack Pierce shaved his head, applied cotton and collodion to broaden his brow, and inserted bolts into his neck. Karloff removed dental prosthetics to create hollows in his cheeks. The costume included boots weighted with lead and asphalt, adding 20 pounds to his already strained back. The work was grueling. He stood on set for hours under intense lights, his body enclosed in foam while electrical arcs crackled overhead. When Frankenstein premiered in November 1931, audiences were captivated by the creature's jerky reanimation and subsequently moved by its bewildered childlike expressions. In one scene, the monster extends a hand toward a light, seeking warmth. In another, he interacts with a young girl, playfully tossing flowers into a lake. Before the tragic realization unfolds, he inadvertently drowns her, his naivete starkly apparent in the most horrifying manner. Karloff depicted these moments with poignant innocence, revealing not a mere brute, but a solitary outcast who resorts to violence only when provoked. Critics who had anticipated gratuitous thrills instead commended the portrayal's subtlety. The New York Times lauded the performance as a poignant conception of pathos. The unknown actor behind the question mark had suddenly achieved widespread recognition. Overnight fame brought financial prosperity, but also the peril of typecasting. Universal rapidly enlisted Karloff in a succession of now-classic horror films over the subsequent 3 years, including The Old Dark House, The Mummy, The Mask of Fu Manchu, The Black Cat, and the acclaimed Bride of Frankenstein. In The Mummy, he embodied the ancient priest Imhotep, his eyes smoldering with millennia of yearning for his lost bride. Despite his reanimated state, he delivered a performance of restrained intensity, demonstrating that the villain's cruelty stemmed from profound sorrow. He reprised the role of the monster in both Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein, and on each occasion, he managed to deepen the character's humanity. Both were exceptionally worthy continuations, and many regard the second film in particular as the zenith of the series, partly due to Elsa Lanchester's remarkable portrayal of Mary Shelley and the monster's visually striking bride. Between these productions, he worked tirelessly, alternating between classic horror features like The Mummy and roles in gangster films such as the original Scarface, both released in 1932, and dramas like The Lost Patrol a few years later. At Universal, he frequently collaborated with Bela Lugosi. Some enthusiasts believe the two were bitter rivals, a narrative sensationalized by gossip columnists for years. Nevertheless, evidence suggests that not only was there no animosity between them, but they also dined together and occasionally engaged in card games. However, the commonly repeated assertion that Lugosi served as Sarah's godfather is inaccurate, even though it would have provided a compelling counterpoint to the rivalry rumors. When Lugosi passed away in 1956, Karloff contributed to the costs of his funeral. Both actors had been indelibly typecast by singular roles, and both understood the burdens and advantages of that destiny. Even if Lugosi initially felt resentful of Karloff's ascent, Boris was simply not a person one could find disagreeable. Karloff's affability on set, he memorized lines to assist other actors, arrived early to help novices rehearse, and never sought to overshadow his colleagues, earned him widespread respect. Beyond the sound stages, Karloff found solace in quiet pursuits. He was an avid reader and gardener, and he became an enthusiastic cricketer. In 1932, he joined fellow British expatriates such as David Niven, Ronald Colman, and C. Aubrey Smith at the Hollywood Cricket Club, a haven of cucumber sandwiches and crisp white attire under the Los Angeles sun. The club offered both camaraderie and a degree of social influence. Members were expected to play on Sundays, and the perpetually bandaged Karloff served as a wicket-keeper. His teammates playfully teased him for frequently being called for leg before wicket due to his somewhat ungainly stance. Matches were initially held at UCLA's football field until Smith persuaded the city to construct a proper ground in Griffith Park, complete with imported British turf. Yet, the cricket field also became a forum for a different kind of struggle, the fight for actors' rights. In the spring of 1933, Karloff and Smith convened clandestine meetings at the club to discuss the formation of a union to counter the studio's oppressive work schedules and exploitative contracts. Producers mandated 6-day work weeks, withheld overtime pay, and extended contracts indefinitely. Extras were treated with a degree of dehumanization. For Karloff, who had personally endured considerable physically demanding labor, this situation was unacceptable, and he believed that working actors could collectively advocate for improved conditions. Thus, he began to position himself at the forefront of this covert movement. Karloff always carried a roll of dimes to facilitate discreet telephone calls from public payphones to finalize the arrangements for their new guild before its public announcement. On the 19th of July, 1933, he became member number 9 of the Screen Actors Guild. Alongside fellow cricketers Claude King and Alan Mowbray, he served on the Guild's inaugural board of directors, leveraging his star status to persuade hesitant colleagues. The Guild soon compelled the studios to acknowledge actors' entitlements to rest periods, safe working conditions, and equitable compensation. Karloff remained on the board until 1951, witnessing the union evolve into a formidable bulwark against exploitation. The very qualities that humanized his monstrous portrayals, empathy, and a strong sense of justice, also fueled his activism. In 1940, he extended his compassion beyond the film set and into hospitals. The Associated Press reported that he donned a Santa Claus costume to distribute gifts to children with disabilities at Beeman Hospital. The following year, he repeated this gesture, presenting gifts to 200 young patients while telling reporters, "I truly adore children, and I am not nearly as unpleasant as I am made out to be." His voice also provided comfort to children as he read bedtime stories on New York's WAR radio. Indeed, he would later solidify his place in the minds of youngsters from the 1960s onward when he narrated How the Grinch Stole Christmas, a performance that garnered a Grammy Award. During World War II, he participated in benefit performances for the Motion Picture Relief Fund and visited wounded soldiers. He also undertook the renovation of old churches and established a fund to support aspiring young athletes. Karloff utilized his personal resources to repair buildings and sponsor sporting equipment. On his farm, he kept dogs, chickens, turkeys, a cow named Elsie, and a pet pig. He cultivated vegetables and flowers and was known to deliver fresh produce to his neighbors. His boundless acts of kindness perplexed those who associated him with his on-screen monsters and villains. "Every time I enter a room, there is a noticeable lull in the merriment," he once quipped. "I pat little children on the head and vote, yet strangers cast peculiar glances." His wife, Dorothy, observed that portraying sinister roles made him more amiable at home, as he expunged any latent malevolence through his characters. Dorothy Stein, a Montanan, became his spouse in 1930. She subsequently gave birth to his only child, Sarah Jane, on the 23rd of November, 1938. This birth coincided with the filming of Son of Frankenstein. Desperate not to miss the delivery of his firstborn, Karloff departed the set, still in full monster makeup, to be present for the birth, an act that surely caused some alarm among the staff of the maternity ward that day. However, the marriage began to falter as his career experienced a resurgence in the 1940s and became irrevocably strained as he grew increasingly closer to an old acquaintance, Evelyn Hope Helmore. Undeniably, a contributing factor was that Boris had never disclosed the truth about his prior marriages to Dorothy or their daughter, but he had confided his innermost thoughts to Evelyn. Eventually, he and Dorothy decided to dissolve their union, a process that proved to be something of an administrative ordeal in those times. He spent 6 weeks in Boulder City, Nevada, to establish residency for divorce proceedings, lodging at the Boulder Dam Hotel, and participating in charitable events during his stay. On the 10th of April, 1946, he divorced Dorothy, and on the 11th of April, married his longtime friend, Evelyn. Evelyn remained by his side for the remainder of his life, knitting quietly on film sets and accompanying him on tours. Sarah resided with her mother in Los Angeles, while Karloff and Evelyn relocated to New York in 1949. It was Evelyn, in fact, who later revealed to Sarah the surprising truth about her father's 4 preceding marriages. Karloff's relationship with Dorothy and Sarah remained cordial. He provided them with financial support and visited his daughter frequently. Sarah, who coincidentally shares his birthday, later remarked that her father was an inherently kind individual and suggested that his monstrous portrayal served as a protective shell for a gentle spirit. By the mid-1940s, The universal horror era had begun to wane. Seeking novel material, Karloff signed with producer Val Lewton at RKO. Lewton's low-budget films emphasized psychological suspense over overt monstrousness, and they offered Karloff roles that presented him with new challenges. For instance, in Robert Wise's 1945 film, The Body Snatcher, he portrayed a cunning coachman who pilfers graves to supply cadavers to a medical school. Critics noted the moral ambiguity of a character who exhibits kindness towards children and animals, yet murders an innocent dog in pursuit of his objective. Karloff relished the opportunity to deliver sophisticated dialogue and collaborate with talented filmmakers like Wise. He later stated that Lewton saved my soul by freeing me from caricature. Later that year, his cinematic journey continued with Isle of the Dead, where he embodied a Greek commander stranded on an island ravaged by a deadly epidemic. This was followed in 1946 by Bedlam, a chilling portrayal of a manager overseeing a psychiatric institution. These cinematic ventures provided him a canvas to delve into the intricacies of morality, skillfully leveraging his innate talent for generating dread through a piercing, unsettling stare that characterized his unique, eerie persona. On the theatrical stage, he achieved significant acclaim in the dark Broadway comedy Arsenic and Old Lace. This production, a darkly humorous piece, featured him as Jonathan Brewster, a murderer whose extensive plastic surgery ironically left him bearing a striking resemblance to Boris Karloff. Each evening, the actor playing his character's sibling would deliver the now famous line, "He looks like Boris Karloff," eliciting uproarious laughter from the audience as Karloff himself stood present as Jonathan. The play enjoyed a remarkable run of 1,444 performances, cementing his status as a theatrical luminary. Reviewers lauded his impeccable comedic timing and the distinctive dynamic between the actor and his portrayed character, leading Karloff to reprise his role on a national tour. In 1956, he garnered a Tony Award nomination for his sensitive depiction of a compassionate bishop in Jean Anouilh's The Lark. He also took on the iconic role of Captain Hook in a revival of Peter Pan. The sheer delight he derived from unsettling young audience members on stage was tempered by his charming custom of greeting them afterward with a warm smile and candy canes. Television and radio emerged as fresh avenues for his distinctive voice. He graced the screen in the series Colonel March of Scotland Yard, portraying a meticulous detective tasked with unraveling inexplicable cases. Furthermore, he hosted the anthology thriller series from 1960 to 1962, introducing terrifying narratives under the ominous title Tales of Courtly Menace. His vocal talents were further showcased through his recordings of poetry and ghost stories, including the highly successful An Evening with Boris Karloff and His Friends. In 1966, he made a memorable contribution to the animated adaptation of Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Children who had previously penned missives to the Frankenstein monster now sent thank you notes for the Grinch's return of the stolen presents. Karloff found immense joy in these letters, responding personally whenever possible, often with autographed photographs or small tokens of appreciation. He continued to host radio programs where he read classic fairy tales. Even as his respiratory health declined, he recorded albums of children's verse, demonstrating remarkable dedication by working through periods of coughing. The 1960s witnessed a resurgence of Gothic horror in cinema, this time infused with a more vibrant and audacious aesthetic. Director Roger Corman enlisted Karloff to star alongside fellow genre titans Vincent Price and Peter Lorre in The Raven and the Terror, allowing him to humorously subvert his own established persona while retaining an undeniable aura of menace. The Italian filmmaker Mario Bava's giallo anthology I Tre Volti della Paura, often translated as Black Sabbath, presented him with a trio of roles, including that of a vampiric patriarch resurrected from his tomb in the segment titled The Drop of Water. The film's English distributors deemed the original Italian title too understated for international appeal, opting instead for a new title that would later inspire a certain Birmingham-based band to adopt the moniker Black Sabbath after encountering a poster outside their rehearsal space, thus indirectly linking Karloff to the genesis of heavy metal. The production proved to be an arduous undertaking. By then, he was contending with severe arthritis and emphysema, frequently requiring supplemental oxygen from a mask between shooting sequences. Nevertheless, he persisted in accepting roles that piqued his interest, undeterred by his deteriorating health. In the 1967 film The Sorcerers, he depicted a hypnotist exerting control over a young man's psyche. This thought-provoking film explored themes of media manipulation and is considered a somewhat overlooked cinematic treasure. His penultimate significant on-screen appearance was in Peter Bogdanovich's startling and impactful postmodern film Targets, released in 1968. The movie masterfully juxtaposes the waning era of Gothic horror with the stark realities of contemporary gun violence. Karloff portrayed Byron Orlock, a veteran horror actor on the verge of retirement who confronts a modern-day mass shooter. His character's moniker serves as a clever allusion to the renowned romantic poet Lord Byron and the protagonist of F.W. Murnau's seminal silent horror masterpiece, Nosferatu. During the filming of Targets, Karloff maintained his characteristic enthusiasm. Despite relying on leg braces for stability and requiring oxygen tanks, he expressed hesitation only once regarding a line that seemed to diminish the value of past horror films, thereby potentially trivializing his own extensive career. Peter Bogdanovich persuaded him that audiences would interpret it as a fond act of self-parody. In one exceptionally crafted scene, filmed in a single continuous shot, Karloff delivered a profound monologue adapted from W. Somerset Maugham's rendition of The Appointment in Samara, showcasing some of his most compelling acting. His daughter, Sarah, later recounted that he considered Targets to be his finest film, primarily due to its exploration of authentic human dread rather than fantastical creatures. As he aged, the cumulative physical strain from decades of demanding work and heavy costumes began to take its toll. Arthritis contorted his spine, and his lungs, ravaged by years of cigarette smoke and the pervasive plaster dust from film sets, grew increasingly compromised. Yet, he remained resolute in his determination to die in harness, as Evelyn had once put it. In 1968, he journeyed to Los Angeles, laboriously pulling his oxygen tanks behind him, to participate in the filming of a series of low-budget Mexican horror productions, including House of Evil, and Fear Chamber. Between takes, he would once again seek respite with a respirator. However, when the cameras rolled, he would stand tall, straighten his shoulders, and deliver his lines with unwavering energy. The demanding production schedule and extensive travel proved nearly fatal, yet he steadfastly insisted on honoring his contractual obligations. In fact, by that point, he had been living outside the United States for the better part of a decade. Having returned to England in 1959, many questioned his decision, particularly given the exceptionally high tax rates prevalent in Britain at that time. Karloff, however, dismissed their concerns, viewing it as a worthwhile sacrifice for the appeal of the cooler climate and the richness of British culture. Friends recalled his contentment in re-embracing the customs of his homeland, cheerfully preparing tea for guests, engaging in spirited discussions about cricket matches, and occasionally reciting Shakespearean verse. Throughout the 1960s, he continued his philanthropic endeavors, raising funds for the Motion Picture Relief Fund and for pediatric hospitals. He also lent his support to civil rights initiatives, discreetly contributing to organizations actively combating racism and censorship, perhaps drawing a parallel to his own lifelong need to obscure certain aspects of his identity. His final months were punctuated by recurrent hospitalizations. In November of 1968, he was admitted to King Edward VIII Hospital in Midhurst, West Sussex, suffering from pneumonia, advanced arthritis, and severe pulmonary complications. He passed away there on February 2, 1969, at the venerable age of 81. The funeral service was a private and understated affair. News of his passing triggered an outpouring of tributes that underscored the profound contrast between his on-screen villainous portrayals and his off-screen benevolence. Ronald Reagan, who had previously collaborated with him, described Karloff as one of the warmest, kindest, most gentle human beings I have ever met. His life serves as a testament to the notion that compassion is a potent form of strength, and that even those perceived as monsters can become staunch advocates for others. As Karloff himself believed, the true antagonists are those who prey upon their fellow humans in pursuit of avarice. Through his personal example, Hollywood learned that the guise of monstrous makeup could conceal a tender heart, and that audiences possess a deep-seated craving for complexity, even in their most frightening figures. This concludes this special Halloween edition of Hollywood Mysteries. This particular episode was made possible by the exceptionally generous contributions of our top-tier Patreon supporter, Valerie Fellow. As a top-tier supporter, Valerie has the privilege of selecting a personality for me to profile. So, Valerie, I sincerely hope you found this episode enjoyable, and I extend my sincere gratitude once more. To all our dedicated supporters on both Patreon and as YouTube members, your contributions are invaluable and make a significant difference. If you are interested in supporting this channel, various benefits are available, contingent upon the chosen support tier. For $3 per month, you gain access to my secondary series, Hollywood Histories, where I delve into intriguing and less explored facets of Hollywood's past through weekly podcast episodes. Additionally, supporters receive early access to new videos and a range of other exclusive perks. Please visit the Patreon link provided in the description or click the Join button below this video on YouTube to learn more. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. And why not leave a comment below to share your favorite Boris Karloff role? Until our next encounter, may your dreams be sweet.